Now, with coverage you trust, this is 10 News Conference.
State Treasurer Gina Raimondo's investment strategy for the state's pension fund gets high marks from some financial experts, but others say her investment strategy is losing money for the state. Will she or won't she? Raimondo still hasn't said for sure if she's running for governor next year, but she's raised about $2 million so far, and the 2014 political season is still a few months away. State Treasurer Gina Raimondo is our guest this morning on 10 News Conference. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Jim. How are you?
Good. We've got a lot to talk about, but first I'll get a political question out of the way. Are you running for governor next year?
Am I running for governor? You know, I've got 2.5 weeks before Providence Public School starts, so I've got a couple weeks to hit the beach with my family, and I want to enjoy the rest of that. So that's where my brain is. But, you know, look, I've told you many times before, a lot of people are encouraging me to run. I think the state does need leadership, and I'm thinking hard about it.
Raising all the money that you've raised so far, $2 million,
yes.
It would seem that you're doing more than thinking about it. So why won't you just say yes or no, whether you're running or not? Yeah. What is the hesitation?
You know, I'm not in a position where I can self-fund a campaign, and so raising money makes it an option. And I have been overwhelmed with support from folks who have called on me to run, and they're supporting me financially. But you know, I'm a straight shooter. Once I decide, I will make that decision public.
Well, let me ask you this. The rumor mill in this town never stops, and the rumor mill has it. Some people are saying you may run as an independent to avoid a primary. If you do run, will you run as a Democrat, or is it possible that you would run as an independent?
No, of course I'll run as a Democrat. I've always been a Democrat.
No chance of running as an independent?
No, Jim, I come from a working class family. My dad was the first guy in our college to go to college on a GI Bill. My brother and sister and I went to college using student loans, some of them federal student loans. My parents live on Social Security. I'm a Democrat. Democrats fight for people like me and my family, opportunity, level the playing field. That's who I am. And if I run, I'm running as a Democrat.
Okay. As you know, last Sunday, the Providence Journal, Mike Stanton from the Providence Journal, did quite an extensive article about your investment strategy. And there was a sidebar to that piece where he had requested certain documents that have been presented at investment commission hearings, in a public hearing. And you gave him the documents, and they're pretty much all redacted. They're just blacked out. And now 4 good government groups, including the ACLU, Common Cause, have written to you asking you to release those documents. So I have two questions. Since the documents were released in public meetings, does that not automatically waive any confidentiality agreement that you had with the hedge fund companies? And 2, don't you feel that taxpayers have a right to see what's in those documents? It's all about their money.
Yeah, you know, good questions, very good questions. And I think you know I have a clear track record of being very serious about transparency. You know, under my leadership, we've launched the state's first ever investor relations portal. In fact, we've received nationwide recognition for our transparency efforts. Under my leadership, the pension fund is now recognized nationally as a leader around transparency. So I've done, at every turn, I've gone above and beyond to operate a transparent administration. And, you know, in fact, the SEC dropped its investigation into our pension practices.
Well, why aren't you transparent with these documents?
Well, we have been. So, look, there's a balance.
Not the ones you gave Mike Stanton.
Well, there is a balance, and I think they raise excellent points. And these are tough choices, right? These are not easy calls. The law is pretty clear. You know, the law is clear that there's certain information, personnel information, HR records, confidential strategic information.
But is there information in those documents that pertain to fees and things of that nature?
All of our fees have been disclosed. In fact, Rhode Island...
There's no information about fees in those documents?
There is, but that's been disclosed. That's on our website. In fact, Rhode Island, under my leadership, is one of the only pension funds, because, as I've said, it's a balance. It is a balance, right? At the end of the day, what's my job? Make sure people's pensions are there when they need them.
But when you enter into these agreements with the hedge funds, and knowing that you claim you have this record of transparency, could you not tell the hedge funds, look, you're doing business in Rhode Island. If you want our business, everything in these documents have to be released to the public. It's going to be up to us, not up to you, the hedge fund.
You certainly could do that. And in fact, that is what I did with the fees. So went to the hedge fund industry. It's not common practice. Rhode Island is one of very few pension funds around the country that puts all the fee information online. And we're setting the standard for transparency by doing that. And we went to them and said, if you want to do business with us, you have to share this information. We could go to them and say, we have to put everything online.
Will you?
But if we did that, there would likely be repercussions.
Like what?
Like they would, not allow us to continue to do business with them.
Well, aren't there other funds to choose from?
The standard practices in this industry are not other funds that do this kind of work. I think it's worth pausing to say, why are we in these funds in the first place? Which is,
we're going to get to that.
I think the
Right.
the real
Right.
question here. And
Right.
we have to remember, in the last stock market decline,
Right.
Rhode Island pensioners lost $2 billion. That's $2 billion.
Well, we're going to get into that, but I want to stay on this for a minute.
Okay.
So you've received these letters from Common Cause, ACLU, I think the League of Women Voters, and another group. Are you going to release these documents?
We've released the documents.
Are you going to release the documents unredacted?
We're going to look at their precise requests, but as I've said, we've signed contracts. We have to run a professional operation. We're in compliance with the law. We're in compliance with our contracts. We've disclosed above and beyond. We've disclosed all information which is disclosable. But there is, you referenced APRA. There's clear provisions in the law which say HR information is confidential, personnel information is confidential. It's in the best interest of the pensioners to maintain strong long-term relationships with these investment
But don't you see how
managers.
people are skeptical of that? Rhode Islanders just went through this 38 studio fiasco.
Right.
And one of the biggest problems in there was that people were kept in the dark, including legislators who voted on a bill that they didn't even know what they were voting for. So when you say, kind of like, trust me, we disclosed everything, and yet Mike Stanton gets these redacted documents, people are skeptical of that.
Look, I think it's a fair point. I think it's a fair point. We're constantly looking at our policies. There's no easy answers to these issues. As I said, I've gone above and beyond to over-disclose everything we can. You remember, this isn't 38 studios. Every one of these decisions was made by a committee in a public meeting. All of the information has been public. All of these meetings have been held in the public. All of the fee information is online. All of the performance information is online. So, I take the point, and if we can get them to disclose more, of course we'll do that. I take these concerns seriously, and I'm always pushing more transparency, lower fees.
All right. Last year you had a return on investment of 11%, and you have about 14% or so in hedge fund, 1%, I guess, of our $7 billion. And if you had used the Russell 3000 index instead, your critics say you could have made about $100 million more, thereabouts. Right? So how do you justify your investment strategy? You started to talk about it. When people look at this and say, geez, we're losing money.
Yeah. So, again, what I do, I think about my parents. My parents live on a small pension from my dad and Social Security. They rely on that check. That check has to come in the mail for them every month. The people in Rhode Island relying on a pension check deserve that check to be there. In 2008, in 2009, when we were in all these index funds that you reference, those pensioners lost $2 billion. That's $2 billion of their hard-earned money that we can't recover. It's gone. We still have not made it up. The reason for that is because all of our eggs were in one basket. It wasn't properly diversified. I sometimes liken it to a roller coaster. I'm taking my kids to Storyland next week. So, it's like, we used to be on the Six Flags roller coaster, all the way up and then all the way down. We need the smaller roller coaster. We're trying to smooth it out. So this strategy was designed to diversify the portfolio, to provide strong long-term returns. We hit 11% return, net of all fees and expenses, but with less risk. So at the end of the day, I hear what you're saying, my critics. I'm interested
or people in general.
Fine.
You know how people in the state, again, I have to use the 38 studios. There's one more example of they had the wool pulled over their eyes and now we're paying for it.
Right, but in this case, we have an 11% return, net of fees, with less risk, better cash flow, pensions are more secure. I've got one job, secure pensions. And the pension system today is much more secure than when I took office. The assets are being managed with less risk and strong return, and the liabilities have been right-sized. So when I'm out and about, and I talk to retired teachers, just the other night I was talking to a retired teacher at an event. She pulled me aside and she said, you just keep doing what you're doing. Forget about the politics. We need our pension checks. And so everything that we do is with that in mind. People need their pension checks. They deserve them.
That obviously wasn't Bob Walsh.
Yeah.
We have to take a break. General Treasurer Gina Raimondo is our guest today on 10 News Conference. We'll be right back. Welcome back to 10 News Conference. Our guest this morning is State Treasurer Gina Raimondo. You were talking about your investment strategy in the last segment, but it also comes with very high fees to these money managers, extremely high fees. And is that being fair to the taxpayers? Because if you use the Russell Index or other indexes, the fees would be certainly lower.
Mm-hmm. It's true. You know, I do want to make clear the majority of our stocks in the pension fund are invested in low-fee index funds. However, it's all about diversifying. Again, we want a diverse portfolio to make sure money's there for people. We can't put all of our eggs in one basket. If you put all your eggs in one basket, you lose too much money when the stock market goes down. So with some portion of the assets, the investment committee decided to use some of these tools to invest in things that diversify the portfolio. And you know, this is very standard. Most pension funds do it. Every university endowment invests in this way. You know, even locally, I'm sure this is how Brown invests, the Rhode Island Foundation, Lifespan. The best institutional investors, this is a very standard way to reduce risk and smooth out returns.
Well, here's a transparency question. As you know, there's an organization in the state called Engage Rhode Island.
Yes.
It's a big secret organization because nobody knows who's in it. Do you know if there are any of these hedge fund managers that you're giving business to that are supporting you, because Engage Rhode Island does support you, by giving money to Engage Rhode Island?
I don't know. You know, that's a separate organization and you'd have to ask them. I can tell you that I do not raise money. None of my campaign money comes from any money managers that do business with the pension.
Okay. When you talk about your investment strategy and hedge funds, and some of this would, for most people, this would be talking about sophisticated investment arms or products. Most people don't know what hedge funds are or have a really good understanding. So if you run for governor, the thing you're considering, how do you intend to explain this to the public where it's going to be relatively easy for your opponents, if you're in a primary, to make negative ads about what you're doing, and you're going to, don't you think you're going to have a hard time explaining what you're doing to the average Rhode Islander?
To the average Rhode Islander. Here's what I think, Jim. It's time to remove politics from these decisions.
But you can't. You're a politician.
That's true. But my political future is not a reason to make an investment decision. A week or so ago, there was a program about interviewing Central Falls retirees. When Central Falls went bankrupt, those people, firefighters, municipal workers, they lost half of their pensions. You know what's happening to them now? They're losing their houses because they can't pay their mortgages. They can't take care of their families. That is why we make these decisions. Not what's good for Gina Raimondo, what's right for teachers and hardworking state employees. These decisions were made to provide retirement security, and it's working. We have strong returns with less risk, net of fees. If that causes political problems for me, so be it. I'm not going to buckle to political pressure, because at the end of the day, on my watch, this pension fund is going to be well managed. In 10, 20 years from now, when I'm long gone, people will get their pension checks. It's not Detroit, it's not Central Falls. Those people are suffering because politicians got weak, and I'm not doing it.
Why such a high percentage in hedge funds? The national average is something like 1.2%. We have 14%. Why? Why do we need that high percentage?
That's a great question. You know, I think we have to do what's right for us, which is to say, in Rhode Island, we have an underfunded system. We have more retired people than active people. So we just cannot afford the ups and the downs. We just cannot afford to lose $2 billion like we did in 2008 because, you know, we have such an underfunded system. So what's right for Rhode Island may or may not be right for, you know, Wisconsin, which is a very well-funded system. I will also say, if you look at the very best, say, university endowments, you know, Harvard, Yale, again, Rhode Island Foundation, Lifespan, their allocation to these kind of products is much higher than the state of Rhode Island.
But they're not dealing with tax dollars.
Well, all the more reason. I mean, I don't understand why that's relevant. In fact, if a taxpayer should be very happy with this investment strategy, because if we lose $2 billion, the taxpayer makes up the difference.
If this is such a good investment strategy for public pensions, do you know of any other city or town in Rhode Island that is using this same strategy, a high percentage of hedge fund, in their investments?
I know that Providence has a good deal of hedge funds. And
you know what the percentage is?
I don't know the percentage.
Is it higher than 14%, do you think?
I don't know what the percentage is. I know they heavily rely on them, which could be very appropriate, and I know they are performing well. So at the end of the day, this is performance, not politics. Let me say this. If it looks like this portfolio isn't working, we're going to change it. 10 years ago, if we were managing money to reduce risk, we might have put money in bonds. Pretty standard, 60-40 mix, 40% in bonds. You put your money in bonds today, you make nothing. You can't diversify in the same way you used to. So we have to be constantly innovating, evaluating, doing what's best. I'm all about performance. If it's working, we'll keep it. If it's not working, we'll switch it. We've had to fire a couple of these hedge funds. And if they don't perform, or if they're too expensive, or if they're not doing what they need to do, we'll get rid of them. But I am not making decisions based on politics. I'm going to make decisions on what's right for state employees and teachers.
Well, I'll ask you a political question. You just mentioned that Providence uses hedge funds. You're not sure about how much, but they use hedge funds, and they've been successful with them. There's been a lot of ink spilled about your investment strategy. And the TV stations, radio stations have done a lot of reporting on it. I've just requested their portfolios, their investment portfolios. So I intend to do something on it. Do you think you're getting picked on by the press and the Providence Journal in particular? Because you don't see them looking at Angel Tavares's pension investment strategy.
Yeah. Look, I think I've shown leadership. I've shown leadership around the pension. We've had to make some tough choices. And it's not it's not a secret that it's my political opponents and opponents of pension reform who are making all this noise. I think sometimes leadership, requires you to make these tough choices. But again, I'll go back to Central Falls, I'll go back to Detroit. There were politicians there who got weak in the face of political opposition. My opponents of pension reform are coming after this strategy. I cannot buckle to that because I owe a duty to the taxpayers of Rhode Island and the people in the pension system. And they're going to get their pension checks under my watch.
Got to take another break. Our guest today is Gina Raimondo. 10 News Conference will continue right after this.
You can watch this program again on our website, turnto10.com. We also have an archive of past programs. Click on Politics.
Welcome back. We're talking with State Treasurer Gina Raimondo. A couple other issues. This past General Assembly session, you beefed up, I think, the Victims Fund, the so-called Victims Fund. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the programs I run is called the Crime Victims Compensation Program. It provides compensation for victims of violent crime. And we worked with the General Assembly to pass a piece of legislation allowing this program to be used for victims of domestic violence for relocation expenses. So if you've been the victim of a violent crime, particularly domestic violence, you can be eligible for up to $2,000 to relocate. And we work very closely with domestic violence advocacy groups in the community, and what they told us was sometimes people just need to get out of a dangerous situation, move, get a plane ticket, get a train ticket, and get out. So, I have tried at every point to make my office more accessible, there for Rhode Islanders, to give Rhode Islanders a hand, and this is I'm very happy about this, that the General Assembly did that.
So even though you say you're still considering running for governor, you did something very gubernatorial-like. Now you're into roads and bridges. Yeah. I mean, you're the first treasurer I've seen here in the 40 years I've been here that got into roads and bridges. Why? Yeah,
I hear that a lot, that I'm a different kind of a treasurer, different kind of a state leader. But, as I said all along, what was pension reform about?
You're not just trying to broaden your issues to
No.
get ready for your run?
Pension reform was about making tough choices to invest in the future. And the General Assembly passed pension reform, saved a few $100 million. We need to use some of that money to invest in the future, invest in education, infrastructure, roads and bridges. As treasurer, I sit on the board of the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund. And early in the session, the speaker came to me and said, you know, Treasurer, we need to invest in infrastructure. Can you help us figure out a smart way to do that? And it turns out it was right under our nose with this Clean Water Finance Authority. So essentially what we did is we worked with the legislature to set up a revolving loan fund modeled after clean water, and that money is going to be available to cities and towns at a discount so they can invest in their roads and bridges. And I think that, you know, it's just a smart program. It's not a Band-Aid. It's not a one-time fix. It's a long-term solution helping out cities and towns. It's tough to run a city and town right now. The resources are tight. School buildings are falling apart. Roads and bridges are falling apart. We've got to rebuild.
Well, let's talk about cities and towns. As you know, Detroit just filed for bankruptcy, and that city it's got $133 billion unfunded pension liability. If you dial 911 in Detroit, you have a 58-minute wait. Squad cars don't have computers. It's horrible.
It is horrible.
We don't have city and towns, I don't think, here in Rhode Island that bad. But we do have municipalities like Woonsocket, West Warwick, serious financial troubles. First of all, what's your assessment of those cities, and are they on the verge of bankruptcy?
Detroit was avoidable. Detroit didn't have to happen. Central Falls didn't have to happen. When we step up and we're honest about the size of these problems, we focus on the math, not the politics, and finding solutions, we can stop these problems. But if we bury our head in the sand, pretend the problem's smaller than it is, worry about politics, you're just going to run into a brick wall.
But you talk about always, let's not worry about politics and take the politics out of it. But everything that needs to be done has to take place in the context of a political system.
But there's a difference, I think, between developing, you know, what we did with pension reform is we brought everybody together, everyone together, 10 months of discussion. And as a result, we built consensus. General Assembly overwhelmingly passed a bill, and we solved a problem. That's what cities and towns have to do. I guess my point is, you reference, you know, Woonsocket, West Warwick, they have real problems, real budget problems. That's not going to go away. The longer they wait to fix it, the harder it's going to be, the bigger the problem gets. Bankruptcy is inevitable. So my only point is, like, get together. Let's get together now, everybody in the boat, and look for a solution. And when you do that, be realistic and honest about the numbers. You know, we had a lot of discussion around what was the right size of the pension liability. Just don't pretend, because of what you said. If you do that, at the end of the day, someone's going to call 911 and the ambulance won't come. Mm-hmm. Some kid's going to show up at school, the school's going to be falling apart. When I was doing pension reform, I was in East Providence, and I ran into a young girl, and it was right when school was starting. And I said, "Oh, are you excited for school? How's school going?" And she said, "Oh, it's okay." And I said, "Well, you know, you don't seem too excited." And she said, "Well, I was so excited to go to 7th grade to play sports, but they just cut sports at my school." That's not right for that kid. So it's time to restructure so kids like her can have sports in schools and do the work we need to do.
Got about 30 seconds left. When might you make up your mind? Is that going to be in 2014 or before that?
This year.
You'll make up your mind this year?
This year.
So your announcement for governor will come when?
I'm going to come back to this station and let you know.
Oh, good.
But tomorrow I'm going to Sand Hill Cove and just relaxing a little bit.
Well, thanks for joining us. We're out of time.
Thanks, Jim.
Our guest today was State Treasurer Gina Raimondo. Thanks for watching this edition of 10 News Conference. Have a great Sunday.